Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. I'm excited to have Mary Cuskelly joining us today. Welcome, Mary. Sorry, Maryrose.
Thank you, Jackie. I'm
Sorry.
really happy to be here, and hello to anyone who's watching.
Thanks for joining us. Maryrose is a writer of fiction and non-fiction. She's lived in Melbourne for many years, but she was born in Queensland, where in the early 1970s there were several high-profile child abductions and murders. The disappearance of Mackay schoolgirl Marilyn Woolman in particular made a lasting impression on her. In 2016, Maryrose was awarded the New England Thunderbolt Prize for Crime Writing for her essay Well Before Dark about Marilyn's disappearance and the way it percolated through her own childhood and later in life. The cane returns to some of the themes and preoccupations of that essay. In 2019, Maryrose's book Weberburn, A True Tale of Blood and Dust, was longlisted for Best Debut and Best True Crime in the 2019 David Awards. She is also author of Original Skin, Exploring the Marvels of the Human Hide, and The End of Charity, Time for Social Enterprise with Nick Francis, which was the winner of the Ironmonger Award. So, as I mentioned before, her new novel is The Cane. Hopefully, you can see my book there if it doesn't disappear too much. And I can see
I'll
you've
have
got
mine
a
as well.
lovely poster behind you as well.
Yes, I hope it's not too overwhelming.
No, it's a very stunning cover. So, yeah, the poster looks great. Just want to mention to people as well, if they're watching, thanks to Alan and Unwin. If you've got a question for Maryrose, please type it in comments and you'll have a chance to win a copy of the cane. So, welcome again, Maryrose.
Thank you.
Just wondering if you want to start off by telling us a bit about the cane.
Okay, so the cane opens 4 weeks after the disappearance of a teenage girl, and the story's set in North Queensland in a sugar growing area in the 1970s. Janet McClimate was walking through the cane fields when she disappeared. And the setting of the 1970s is kind of integral to the book because it's that it was such a febrile time, a time of great social and cultural change, and that really plays into the suspicion and dread that's swirling around the community. And in addition, some of the locals are also remembering back 10 years when another girl disappeared for a couple of days and was found dead, and they, with the assumption that she was drowned. So they're remembering that as well.
And I mentioned in your intro about Marilyn Woolman. So, as some like that's not someone that I'm aware of, but especially probably with growing up in New Zealand as well. Is that similar to what happened? Did she go missing in a cane field or?
Yeah, so the Marilyn Woolman disappeared in 1972 when she was on her way to school. She was riding her bicycle down a track between two cane fields on the way to the main road to catch the bus into Mackay to go to school. And she disappeared virtually without a trace. And I was a bit younger than Marilyn when she disappeared, but I was also a country kid who walked along, quiet roads to go to school. So it was something that I was very aware of as a child that had happened. And it was just something that stayed with me, particularly as a couple of years earlier, two other little girls had disappeared on their way to school in Townsville. And in fact, over the years, these two events had kind of melded for me. And it wasn't until I was thinking about writing something about those disappearances that I was able to go back to the newspapers at the time and kind of peel apart the different threads of those two stories. So the cane has at its core a similar crime in a similar landscape to Marilyn's disappearance, but it's not Marilyn's story or the story of Marilyn's family. It's kind of it draws a lot on my own memories of childhood and growing up in a rural community. And so it was kind of more a starting point than anything else, I suppose. Yeah.
And we've got quite a few people watching, which is great. Reminding people watching that if you've got a question for Maryrose, please type it in comments and I can read it out. And thanks to Alan and Unwin, you'll have a chance to win a copy of the cane. We do have some questions coming through already, which is great. Kelly says she loves the cover and title, and she wonders if you chose the design or title.
No, I had a slightly different title for the book.
Okay.
It was slightly longer. It was kind of like coming from the cane, just opposed to the cane. But my publisher and my editor were really kind of adamant that no, it had to be short and sharp.
Yeah.
So they suggested the cane, and I was happy to acquiesce to their advice. And as for the cover, no, that was designed by Luke Corsby, who's got his design business is called Blue Cork, and yeah, he did an amazing job. So it's quite epic,
and especially with the red in the background as well, that looks really stunning.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic.
Yeah, I bet you were really pleased when you saw it for the first time.
Well, I was kind of, because I was pleased, but I was kind of surprised because it really brought home to me, oh, okay, that's the book that I've written, So yeah, it was a surprise, but a pleasant surprise, and I came but I love the cover.
And Cynthia wonders, as you mentioned, they were remembering about the people who'd disappeared, did you say 10 years before? She just wonders if it's presented in two timelines.
No. It's the first the disappearance that happened 10 years earlier is kind of we don't go back there in the story. It's more just people remembering it. About it.
Yeah. So, and Wendy says you've been involved with crime in both fiction and non-fiction. Settings, is this difficult for you as you write these in your books?
So I'm not quite sure what you mean, moving from fiction to non-fiction, or just writing?
Yeah, I think that's settings. What she means, moving between the two.
Yeah. Look, originally I had thought about writing something about Marilyn's disappearance as non-fiction, but then I kind of realised that some of the things that I wanted to explore and talk about I could do with a bit more freedom in fiction. And I was a little apprehensive because I'd never, I've always really been a non-fiction writer. And so I had to kind of, give myself a little pep talk regularly while I was writing it about moving into fiction. But what was really, and when we came to the editing, I was really helped a lot by my editor. And her input was really invaluable in kind of that final reshaping of the cane. But I kind of think non-fiction's, for me, it's kind of easier.
Yeah.
Fiction, it was a real learning curve for me writing fiction, and just that, plotting and that sort of thing. So it was a great experience in the end, but there were a few times where I was like, oh, I don't know if I can pull this off.
Yeah. And when you were doing research, like you obviously looked more into the case that happened in 1972, I think you said. But what sort of other things did you do for research?
A lot of what I did was, like, I went to this, State Library of Victoria and got all the newspapers from around that time and did a lot of not just reading about the case, but also just looking at columns about, what people were eating, so what's for dinner tonight or whatever, and also advertisements for what people were wearing. And also, and something else that was really useful was letters to the paper.
Okay.
What people were talking about or upset about, or they were concerned about, and also, of course, just the headlines, and so that really helped me when I was working on the setting it in the 70s, and it also helped me because I was a kid in the 70s, so it also just helped with those memories. But that was where I really started with newspapers.
And when you were doing all this research, is there something you could share with us that really surprised you?
What surprised me? There was just little things that would kind of tickle me. Like I was reading, I think it was so it was in 1972, and Germaine Greer was giving a lecture in New Zealand, actually, and she said the word bullshit, in public, and that caused such a fuss. So it was just like little things like that where you kind of realize how culturally things have changed so much, and also the way it was when just a certain language that people would use, talking about, like for instance, talking about South Sea Islanders who were brought over to Queensland in the kind of from the late 19th century to the early 20th century, and just the way even in the 70s they were just still referred to like as coloured people, and but also, and just that kind of that talk around bludgers and long hairs, things like that. So just all that language, it really helped me get into the mindset for the 70s and helping me recreate that time.
Yeah. And had you always thought like growing up, had you always thought you'd be a writer?
No. I was always liked writing and reading, particularly. In fact, when I left school, I wanted to be an actor. So for quite a long time, I tried my hand at acting, and doing terrible other jobs to try and keep being an actor. So and then when I finally decided this is not going to work, I'm not going to be able to make my living doing this, so I found my way to the professional writing and editing course at RMIT, and I thought I'd be an editor, but I started writing, doing nonfiction subjects while I was there, and a project that I started there became Original Skin. And I did become an editor. I used to work freelance and in-house as an editor, but more and more I was drawn to writing.
And Kelly says that your book sounds really great and she's definitely going to check it out. She wonders if you've got another book in the pipeline.
Yes, I do. And it's kind of at that delicate stage where I don't want to talk about it too much. But but this one that I'm working on at the moment, it has an urban setting and it's more contemporary. And I don't even know quite whether it's a crime novel. I don't think it's a crime novel. There might be a little bit of a thriller in it, but I'm still, it's just at that very delicate stage. But yes, I am working on something.
So just at the start.
Yeah.
And Kelly also wonders if you like being compared to other writers. She's noticed that you've been described as the next Jane Harper.
Look, part of me is just so delighted to have Jane Harper's name and my name in the same sentence, and another part of me is just terrified, like, please, I don't need the pressure. But I mean, of course, it's really flattering when people say, if you like, Jane Harper's a dry or Mark Brandy's Wimmera, you'll like the cane. Of course, that is, just so flattering and exciting, and it just and also in terms of getting people to read your book, obviously, because they're such well-regarded writers and they write so beautifully. And of course, it's so it's fantastic. But yes, a little bit terrifying.
Yeah. And Cynthia said that, like you said, that you're in Melbourne. She wonders what sort of research you did of the cane growing areas.
I went up to around Mackay and Imeo for a bit of a research trip. And then I was actually planning on going again, you know, in about March 2020 when everything shut down. So I couldn't go again. So I contacted, you know, a cane grower through the Cane Growers Association and had a chat to him over the phone. And I did a lot of YouTubing because I was really wanting to get up to the Burdekin region, which is the only region that still burns the cane before harvesting. Everywhere else has kind of stopped that practice, and they have a big festival every year for the first lighting of the cane. And so I was really set to do that, but then of course I couldn't. So I actually did, you know, so I spoke to people who had experience in cane growing and burning cane, and I did a bit of YouTubing as well.
And Geraldine says she must read your new book. She's originally from Mackay, and she can remember when Marilyn disappeared, and it's so sad that it's never been solved.
Yes, it's a real tragedy, and it's, you know, I have friends. I went to boarding school in Toowoomba, and I have friends who came from Mackay. And there's a real sense of that Mackay still has, like 50 years later, of before Marilyn Woolman went missing and after Marilyn went missing. And that's kind of a point where Marilyn's disappearance, a lot of people still see that as a point where Mackay changed forever. And I think that's the effect of lots, like, you know, tragedies like this. And that was one thing I was kind of interested in exploring in the book, is what something like a tragedy, like the disappearance of a young girl, what that does to a community. And that was really important to me also, that in the book, The Girl Who Disappears, her name is Janet. I wanted Janet's disappearance to have a real and tangible effect upon the community, upon those people who loved her. So yes, but it's Marilyn's disappearance is a real tragedy.
And with the link to Marilyn in the book, has that brought up any new interest in the case?
Not that I know of, but in fact, when I actually started researching what I thought might be a non-fiction book about Marilyn's disappearance in 2014, and it wasn't, and I think it was and her family have been very, like, they've worked really hard to keep her case in the public, you know, in their public awareness. And in 2015, they finally had a funeral for her because a piece of bone that had been discovered a couple of years after she disappeared, they'd finally been able to extract mitochondrial DNA that matched it to her mother. So they only had a funeral for her really very recently. And around that time too, I think they were successful in lobbying the Queensland government, increasing the reward for information, leading to, you know, the arrest of a suspect. But and they did, in fact, a couple of years ago, someone was named as a person of interest, but as far as I'm aware, nothing's come of it.
Yeah, no, that's very sad. And Cynthia and Geraldine both said it's a big shame that you didn't get to see the burning cane. It's amazing to see.
Yeah. Yes, I'm actually heading up to Townsville in June, and I'm hoping I might be able to, you know, to see some cane burning when I'm up in that area.
Yeah. And when you started on the cane, did you know the ending before you start, or at the start?
Not really, no. I mean, I knew, I don't want to give away any spoilers, but I knew that the spectacle of the cane fire is such that I knew that there would be, the climax of the book had to be include that. So and actually, in terms of the ending, it did change a little bit when we were when it was being edited. So I didn't know exactly. No, I'm not one of these authors who plot everything. I'm kind of, what they call them pantsers. You do it by the seat of the pants. So you just kind of start. And I don't really write from beginning to end. I kind of write a bit here, and then I try and make it all work somehow. And and that's where it's really important to have a good editor who can kind of, help you find your way through all those things.
Yeah. And what do you hope readers will love about your book?
Look, I hope that they feel like I've created an authentic community, and that they feel that my recreation of a country town in the 70s kind of has a ring of truth to it. I guess I also, I hope they, come away with a bit of, interest in the 70s and kind of the era, the interesting era that it was. And, I hope, I guess, that they, and I hope that they like the characters, or even, love the characters. Because I think that's kind of one of the things that I think was important to me too in the writing of the novel, creating the characters.
And Wendy's wondering, when you're writing fiction, which in some ways is recognisable to a real situation, do you feel like you've got more pressure on you?
Well, I tried, like I said, the Cane has a similar crime and a similar landscape to Marylos's Disappearance, but I really wanted to, that was the only thing that I really wanted to have in common. I really wanted it to go somewhere completely different. And so, and I think I've done that. So I've tried, the more, as I wrote it, it became further and further away from Marilyn's story. And I didn't want to, like, it wasn't, I wasn't trying to tell Marilyn's story. I wasn't trying to tell the story of the Wallman family. It's just that image, or something around those images of Marilyn's disappearance, have kind of stuck with me all these years. And I kind of wanted to also explore something that had, like, that being a child when something like that is happening around you. And for that, I was able to access my own memories. Not that I grew up near where Marilyn disappeared, but just, just being a child in that time and having things like that swirl about you.
And Geraldine wonders how it affects your writing when the stories is it really emotionally draining for you?
No, I think I'm kind of able to kind of compartmentalize quite easily when it comes to my work. So I don't, no, so I don't, I find it, it's kind of the novel and the story and, the characters, what's happening to them kind of exists in a separate space, that I can keep enclosed.
And what have you found the most difficult part of your writing process?
Look, I mean, lots of writers say this, and it's absolutely true that, every book, you feel like when you start, you feel like you know absolutely nothing. And that you have to learn every time you have to learn to write the book that you're writing. And that's what I find really hard. And, but at the same time, it's also it's the interesting thing as well, but it's the hardest thing.
Yeah. And do you have a favourite place to write?
I have a little studio, which I'm in at the moment. That's kind of it's separate from my house. It's in the backyard, and it's just all mine, and it's completely separate. So that's where I like. It's here that I like to write.
Yeah. And I'm interested to know what you like reading yourself, and if maybe there's something you'd like to recommend to us.
Yeah, look, I read like a really wide variety of things. Obviously, I read a lot of contemporary Australian fiction just to know what's going on. So I'm looking here because these are things that I've read recently. Emily Bitto's Wild Abandon. I just really loved that. And I read Mark Brandy's The Others, which I really enjoyed too, which is also kind of like Mark was kind enough to supply a quote for my novel, where he called it rural. My book was rural noir, and his is kind of The Others is kind of rural noir as well, and it also has Mark writes very well from the perspective of a child, and it's kind of a creepy, thrillery type thing set in the bush. So I really enjoyed that. I also read John Hughes' The Dogs recently, which I also loved. And I read Christos Tsiolkas' 7.5, which I found really interesting because he writes a lot about writing process. And so that was really interesting. More broadly, anything Helen Garner writes, I gobble up, whether it's her fiction or non-fiction or her notebooks. I really love those. So that's a few of the things that I've been reading. But I would highly recommend Wild Abandon by Emily Brito and The Others by Mark Brandy.
No, well, thanks for those recommendations. We always love adding more books to our piles to read.
Yes.
I'm wondering if you have a favourite snack or drink while you're writing.
Well, actually, during during the first year, the COVID year, my husband was like, right, I'm going to buy a coffee machine. So he bought this beautiful little Gaggia espresso maker. So I like when he makes me coffee, and then with our new little machine, which we have continued to use, even when we're not in lockdown.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for talking to me. Been great chatting to you.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thanks for all the questions. They were really great.
Yeah, there's been some great questions. Thanks, everybody. Do you want to just let people know how they can keep in touch with you?
Yes, I'm on Facebook on Maryrose Cuskelly author, and I'm also on Instagram at Maryrose Cuskelly.
Thanks so much, and thanks again to everyone who joined on.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. Thanks.
Bye,
Jackie.
everybody.
Bye.